In the square bedroom with the big window, Mama and Papa were lolling back on their pillows, handing each other things from the wide black tray on the small table with crossed legs. They were smiling, and they smiled even more when the little boy, with the feeling of sleep still in his skin and hair, came in and walked up to the bed. Leaning against it, his bare toes wriggling in the white fur rug, he went on eating peanuts which he took from his pajama pocket. He was 4 years old. "Here's my baby," said Mama. "Lift him up, will you?" He went limp as a rag for Papa to take him under the arms and swing him up over a broad, tough chest. He sank between his parents like a bear cub in a warm litter and lay there comfortably. He took another peanut between his teeth, cracked the shell, picked out the nut whole, and ate it. "Running around without his slippers again," said Mama. "His feet are like icicles." "He crunches like a horse," said Papa. "Eating peanuts before breakfast will ruin his stomach. Where did he get them?" "You brought them yesterday," said Mama, with exact memory, "in a grisly little cellophane sack. I have asked you dozens of times not to bring him things to eat. Put him out, will you? He's spilling shells all over me." Almost at once the little boy found himself on the floor again. He moved around to Mama's side of the bed and leaned confidingly near her and began another peanut. As he chewed, he gazed solemnly in her eyes. "Bright-looking specimen, isn't he?" asked Papa, stretching his long legs and reaching for his bathrobe. "I suppose you'll say it's my fault he's dumb as an ox." "He's my little baby, my only baby," said Mama richly, hugging him, "and he's a dear lamb." His neck and shoulders were quite boneless in her firm embrace. He stopped chewing long enough to receive a kiss on his crummy chin. "He's sweet as clover," said Mama. The baby went on chewing. "Look at him staring like an owl," said Papa. Mama said, "He's an angel, and I'll never get used to having him." "We'd be better off if we never had him," said Papa. He was walking about the room, and his back was turned when he said that. There was silence for a moment. The little boy stopped eating and stared deeply at his Mama. She was looking at the back of Papa's head, and her eyes were almost black. "You're going to say that just once too often," she told him in a low voice. "I hate you when you say that." Papa said, "You spoil him to death. You never correct him for anything, and you don't take care of him. You let him run around eating peanuts before breakfast." "You gave him the peanuts, remember that," said Mama. She sat up and hugged her only baby once more. He nuzzled softly in the pit of her arm. "Run along, my darling," she told him in her gentlest voice, smiling at him straight in the eyes. "Run along," she said, her arms falling away from him. "Get your breakfast." The little boy had to pass his father on the way to the door. He shrank into himself when he saw the big hand raised above him. "Yes, get out of here and stay out," said Papa, giving him a little shove toward the door. It was not a hard shove, but it hurt the little boy. He slunk out and trotted down the hall, trying not to look back. He was afraid something was coming after him. He could not imagine what. Something hurt him all over. He did not know why. He did not want his breakfast. He would not have it. He sat and stirred it round in the yellow bowl, letting it stream off the spoon and spill on the table, on his front, on the chair. He liked seeing it spill. It was hateful stuff, but it looked funny running in white rivulets down his pajamas. "Now look what you're doing, dirty boy," said Marjorie. "You dirty little old boy." The little boy opened his mouth to speak for the first time. "You're dirty yourself," he told her. "That's right," said Marjorie, leaning over him and speaking so her voice would not carry. "That's right, just like your papa." "Mean," she whispered, "mean." The little boy took up his yellow bowl full of cream and oatmeal and sugar with both hands and brought it down with a crash on the table. It burst, and some of the wreck lay in chunks, and some of it ran all over everything. He felt better. "You see," said Marjorie, dragging him out of the chair and scrubbing him with a napkin. She scrubbed him as roughly as she dared until he cried out. "That's just what I said. That's exactly it." Through his tears he saw her face terribly near, red and frowning under a stiff white band, looking like the face of somebody who came at night and stood over him and scolded him when he could not move or get away. Just like your papa. Mean. The little boy went out into the garden and sat on a green bench, dangling his legs. He was clean. His hair was wet, and his woolly blue pullover made his nose itch. His face felt stiff from the soap. He saw Marjorie going past the window with the black tray. The curtains were still closed at the window he knew opened into Mama's room, Papa's room, Mama and Papa's room. The word was pleasant. It made a mumbling, snapping noise between his lips. It ran in his mind while his eyes wandered about, looking for something to do, something to play with. Mama and Papa's voices kept attracting his attention. Mama was being cross with Papa again. He could tell by the sound. That was what Marjorie always said when their voices rose and fell and shot up to a point and crashed and rolled like the two tomcats who fought at night. Papa was being cross too, much crosser than Mama this time. He grew cold and disturbed and sat very still, wanting to go to the bathroom, but it was just next to Mama and Papa's room. He didn't dare think of it. As the voices grew louder, he could hardly hear them anymore. He wanted so badly to go to the bathroom. The kitchen door opened suddenly, and Marjorie ran out, making the motion with her hand that meant he was to come to her. He didn't move. She came to him, her face still red and frowning, but she was not angry. She was scared just as he was. She said, "Come on, honey, we got to go to your grandma's again." She took his hand and pulled him. "Come on, quick, your grandma's waiting for you." He slid off the bench. His mother's voice rose in a terrible scream, screaming something he could not understand, but she was furious. He had seen her clenching her fists and stamping in one spot, screaming with her eyes shut. He knew how she looked. She was screaming in a tantrum, just as he remembered having heard himself. He stood still, doubled over, and all his body seemed to dissolve sickly from the pit of his stomach. "Oh, my God," said Marjorie. "Oh, my God, now look at you. Oh, my God, I can't stop to clean you up." He did not know how he got to his grandmother's house at last, but he was there, wet and soiled, being handled with disgust in the big bathtub. His grandma was there in long black skirts, saying, "Maybe he's sick. Maybe we should send for the doctor." "I don't think so, Mom," said Marjorie. "He hasn't ate anything. He's just scared." The little boy couldn't raise his eyes. He was so heavy with shame. "Take this note to his mother," said Grandma. She sat in a wide chair and ran her hands over his head, combing his hair with her fingers. She lifted his chin and kissed him. "Poor little fellow," she said. "Never you mind. You always have a good time at your grandma's, don't you? You're going to have a nice little visit, just like the last time." The little boy leaned against the stiff, dry-smelling clothes and felt horribly grieved about something. He began to whimper and said, "I'm hungry. I want something to eat." This reminded him. He began to bellow at the top of his voice. He threw himself upon the carpet and rubbed his nose in a dusty, woolly bouquet of roses. "I want my peanuts," he howled. "Somebody took my peanuts." His grandma knelt beside him and gathered him up so tightly he could hardly move. She called in a calm voice above his howls to old Janet in the doorway, "Bring me some bread and butter with strawberry jam." "I want peanuts," yelled the little boy desperately. "No, you don't, darling," said his grandma. "You don't want horrid old peanuts to make you sick. You're going to have some of Grandma's nice fresh bread with good strawberries on it. That's what you're going to have." He sat afterwards very quietly and ate and ate. His grandma sat near him, and old Janet stood by, near a tray with a loaf and a glass bowl of jam upon the table at the window. Outside there was a trellis with tube-shaped red flowers clinging all over it and brown bees singing. "I hardly know what to do," said Grandma. "It's very—" "Yes, Mom," said old Janet, "it certainly is." Grandma said, "I can't possibly see the end of it. It's a terrible—" "It certainly is bad," said old Janet. All this upset all the time, and him such a baby. Their voices ran on soothingly. The little boy ate and forgot to listen. He did not know these women, except by name. He could not understand what they were talking about. Their hands and their clothes and their voices were dry and far away. They examined him with crinkled eyes without any expression that he could see. He sat there waiting for whatever they would do next with him. He hoped they would let him go out and play in the yard. The room was full of flowers and dark red curtains and big soft chairs, and the windows were open, but it was still dark in there somehow, dark, and a place he did not know or trust. "Now drink your milk," said old Janet, holding out a silver cup. "I don't want any milk," he said, turning his head away. "Very well, Janet, he doesn't have to drink it," said Grandma quickly. "Now run out in the garden and play, darling. Janet, get his hoop." A big strange man came home in the evenings who treated the little boy very confusingly. "Say please and thank you, young man," he would roar terrifyingly when he gave any smallest object to the little boy. "Well, fellow, are you ready for a fight?" he would say again, doubling up huge hairy fists and making passes at him. "Come on now, you must learn to box." After the first few times, this was fun. "Don't teach him to be rough," said Grandma. "Time enough for all that." "Now, Mother, we don't want him to be a sissy," said the big man. "He's got to toughen up early. Come on now, fellow, put up your mitts." The little boy liked this new word for hands. He learned to throw himself upon the strange big man whose name was Uncle David and hit him on the chest as hard as he could. The big man would laugh and hit him back with his huge loose fists. Sometimes, but not often, Uncle David came home in the middle of the day. The little boy missed him on the other days and would hang on the gate looking down the street for him. One evening he brought a large square package under his arm. "Come over here, fellow, and see what I've got," he said, pulling off quantities of green paper and string from the box, which was full of flat, folded colors. He put something in the little boy's hand. It was limp and silky and bright green with a tube on the end. "Thank you," said the little boy nicely, but not knowing what to do with it. "Balloons," said Uncle David in triumph. "Now, just put your mouth here and blow hard." The little boy blew hard, and the green thing began to grow round and thin and silvery. "Good for your chest," said Uncle David. "Blow some more." The little boy went on blowing, and the balloon swelled steadily. "Stop," said Uncle David. "That's enough." He twisted the tube to keep the air in. "That's the way," he said. "Now, I'll blow one and you blow one, and let's see who can blow up a big balloon the fastest." They blew and blew, especially Uncle David. He puffed and panted and blew with all his might, but the little boy won. His balloon was perfectly round before Uncle David could even get started. The little boy was so proud he began to dance and shout, I beat, and blew in his balloon again. It burst in his face and frightened him so he felt sick. "Ha, ha, ha, ho," whooped Uncle David. "That's the boy. I bet I can't do that. Now let's see." He blew until the beautiful bubble grew and wavered and burst into thin air, and there was only a small colored rag in his hand. This was a fine game. They went on with it until Grandma came in and said, "Time for supper now." "No, you can't blow balloons at the table. Tomorrow, maybe." And it was all over. The next day, instead of being given balloons, he was hustled out of bed early, bathed in warm soapy water, and given a big breakfast of soft-boiled eggs with toast and jam and milk. His grandma came to kiss him good morning. "And I hope you'll be a good boy and obey your teacher," she told him. "What's teacher?" asked the little boy. "Teacher is at school," said Grandma. "She'll tell you all sorts of things, and you must do as she says." Mama and Papa had talked a great deal about school and how they must send him there. They had told him it was a fine place with all kinds of toys and other children to play with. He felt he knew about school. "I didn't know it was time, Grandma," he said. "Is it today?" "It's this very minute," said Grandma. "I told you a week ago." Old Janet came in with her bonnet on. It was a prickly-looking bundle held with a large black rubber band under her back hair. "Come on," she said. "This is my busy day." She wore a dead cat slung around her neck, its sharp ears bent over under her baggy chin. The little boy was excited and wanted to run ahead. "Hold my hand like I told you," said old Janet. "Don't go running off like that and get yourself killed." "I'm going to get killed, I'm going to get killed," sang the little boy, making a tune of his own. "Don't say that. You give me the creeps," said old Janet. "Hold my hand now." She bent over and looked at him, not at his face, but at something on his clothes. His eyes followed hers. "I declare," said old Janet, "I did forget. I was going to sew it up. I might have known. I told your grandma it would be that way from now on." "What?" asked the little boy. "Just look at yourself," said old Janet crossly. He looked at himself. There was a little end of him showing through the slit in his short blue flannel trousers. The trousers came halfway to his knees above, and his socks came halfway to his knees below, and all winter long his knees were cold. He remembered now how cold his knees were in cold weather, and how sometimes he would have to put the part of him that came through the slit back again, because he was cold there, too. He saw at once what was wrong, and tried to arrange himself, but his mittens got in the way. Janet said, "Stop that, you bad boy." And with a firm thumb she set him in order, at the same time reaching under his belt to pull down and fold his knit undershirt over his front. "There now," she said, "try not to disgrace yourself today." He felt guilty and red all over because he had something that showed when he was dressed that was not supposed to show then. The different women who bathed him always wrapped him quickly in towels and hurried him into his clothes because they saw something about him he could not see for himself. They hurried him so he never had a chance to see whatever it was they saw, and though he looked at himself when his clothes were off, he could not find out what was wrong with him. Outside, in his clothes, he knew he looked like everybody else, but inside his clothes there was something bad the matter with him. It worried him and confused him, and he wondered about it. The only people who never seemed to notice there was something wrong with him were Mama and Papa. They never called him a bad boy, and all summer long they'd taken all his clothes off and let him run in the sand beside a big ocean. "Look at him. Isn't he a love?" Mama would say, and Papa would look and say, "He's got a back like a prize fighter." Uncle David was a prize fighter when he doubled up his mitts and said, "Come on, fellow." Old Janet held him firmly and took long steps under her big rustling skirts. He did not like old Janet's smell. It made him a little quivery in the stomach. It was just like wet chicken feathers.